Evan Granger was burning alive from the inside out. Or at least, that's what it felt like. He lay on a gurney in the ER, shirtless, drenched in sweat, his entire body convulsing with violent chills despite the frigid hospital air. His right shoulder had ballooned to the size of a small melon, grotesquely misshapen, and his skin, once tanned from years under the Nebraska sun, was now a sickening palette of purple, black, and angry red. The worst part wasn't the swelling, it was the lines. From the core of the inflammation, thin streaks of vivid red spidered down his arm like bolts of crimson lightning, crawling toward his elbow, then his wrist. The paramedic had pointed at them when they wheeled him in and muttered 2 words to the triage nurse that had made his mother gasp: blood poisoning. His fever was 104.1 and rising. His pulse was racing, his blood pressure dropping. Sepsis, necrotizing fasciitis, flesh-eating bacteria. Get surgical on standby, the attending physician barked. We've got a hot one here. The room bustled with movement, gloves snapping, 4S being hooked up, orders being shouted over radios and computers, but Evan barely registered it all. He was fading in and out, the fluorescent ceiling lights blurring with the rhythm of his pounding skull. Every throb sent a white-hot spike of pain through his shoulder, down his arm and into his chest. His mother, Linda, stood at his left side, gripping his hand like she was trying to hold him here on Earth. His father, Ray, hovered behind her, pale as a ghost, fists clenched, unable to process what was happening. Just 48 hours ago, they were talking about football season and college scholarships. Now they were watching their only child slip away, hour by hour. Is he going to lose the arm? Ray finally asked, voice tight. Dr. Marquez, a surgeon called down from the trauma floor, didn't sugarcoat it. We'll try to save it. But we may be past that. We need to get him into surgery now. Every minute counts. Evan, delirious, opened his mouth. At first, nothing came out. Then, barely audible, a single word: scholarship. The doctor paused for a beat, staring at the young man on the table, 18, built like a tank, the kind of kid who'd clearly lived in the gym for years, disciplined, driven. And now this. Son, Dr. Marquez said gently, leaning close, we're not thinking about scholarships right now, we're thinking about keeping you alive. Evan blinked slowly, and a single tear ran from the corner of his right eye. Linda turned to Dr. Marquez, voice cracking. How did this happen? He's healthy. He's never sick. He just had a pimple, that's all. Just a tiny one on his shoulder. He popped it after practice. He didn't think anything of it. No one would have. Ray added, more to himself than anyone else, it was 4 days ago. Monday night, after the gym. He said it hurt a little, but just a pimple. 4 days. That's all it took. 4 days for a microscopic invader, something invisible to the eye, to turn a promising athlete into a medical emergency. 4 days for dreams of scholarships, scouts, and stadium lights to be replaced with nightmares of scalpels, 4 drips, and possible amputation. It didn't matter how strong Evan was, or how disciplined, or how hard he trained. He had opened a tiny wound in a dirty gym locker room with bare, unwashed hands, and now the price was being exacted, pound for pound, cell by cell. As they wheeled Evan toward the OR, Linda walked beside the gurney, still holding his hand, whispering prayers and promises she wasn't sure she believed. She'd always thought of hospitals as places of healing, places where answers were given and solutions found. But now, as the heavy doors swung open and swallowed her son into the sterile white glow of the surgical wing, all she felt was helplessness and a creeping horror she couldn't shake. Behind her, Ray remained rooted to the ER floor, staring at his hands, big, calloused, trembling. His whole life he'd preached toughness to Evan. No pain, no gain. Push through it. Real athletes don't complain. Now those words tasted like poison. His son had followed his lead, played through the pain, ignored the signs, because that's what men do, right? But Ray had never faced this. No one had prepared them for this. Inside the OR, Dr. Marquez and the team moved quickly. Monitors beeped, tools were laid out, and Evan was prepped and anesthetized. The initial incision revealed what they feared. Necrotic tissue, black and foul-smelling, had spread deep into the deltoid muscle. The bacteria had devoured muscle fibers like acid, spreading fast and wide. They had to cut, deep. 4 days earlier, the world still made sense. It was late August in Lincoln, Nebraska, and the golden haze of summer hadn't quite given way to the bite of fall. Evan Granger stood in front of the weight room mirror, his tank top soaked in sweat, chest heaving after a brutal shoulder workout. His delts burned, in that satisfying way that promised growth. The gym's fluorescent lights caught the sheen of sweat on his skin, defining every cut, every line. He looked like a division linebacker, because he was becoming one. "Stanford, man," said Miguel, his best friend and gym partner, slapping him on the back. "They're gonna love you. That last set was beast mode." Evan grinned, tossing his towel over his shoulder. "I just want a shot. Give me one campus visit, I'll do the rest." And he would. He always had. From Pop Warner to high school varsity, Evan wasn't just naturally gifted, he was obsessed. Obsessed with tape, with macros, with recovery, with footwork, obsessed with getting out. Because Lincoln wasn't a place where dreams bloomed, it was where they went to die slow deaths in cornfields and factory lines. His dad used to talk about playing for the Huskers, back before a torn ACL ended that dream. Now Ray Granger watched his son and said, "Don't waste your shot like I did." And Evan took that to heart. Every practice was war. Every rep was mission critical. Coach Dunning, the high school's gruff, flat-capped football coach, had told him just last week, "Scouts from UCLA, Michigan, and Stanford will be in the stands week 1. Show 'em who you are, Granger." So there were no off days, no excuses, no pain that couldn't be pushed through. After gym, Evan and Miguel hit the showers. The locker room buzzed with testosterone and music leaking from a Bluetooth speaker someone had stashed in their duffel. Evan peeled off his sweat-drenched tank and noticed a small red bump near the crest of his right shoulder, right where the bar had pressed during overhead presses. He squinted, rubbed at it. It looked like a pimple. A whitehead, maybe. "Damn thing hurts," he muttered. Miguel glanced over. "It's a zit. You've been murdering shoulders lately. Friction and sweat, man." Evan didn't think twice. He raised 2 fingers and popped it. A sting of pain, a little white pus, a dot of blood. He grabbed a paper towel, wiped it down, and reached for his hoodie. Gone. Forgotten. That was Monday. On Tuesday, the bump was tender and red. The surrounding skin was irritated, nothing major. Chloe noticed it during lunch under his t-shirt. "Hey," she said, reaching across the lunch table to brush his sleeve. "What's that on your shoulder?" He shrugged. "Just a zit I popped. Gym thing." She frowned. "It looks inflamed." "It's nothing. Don't go full WebMD on me, brr." He dropped it, but not happily. Hat night, after team conditioning and another gym session, because he couldn't let his numbers drop now, not with scouts coming. Evan winced while putting on his shirt. The red patch had grown, warm to the touch, maybe quarter-sized. He applied some Neosporin, slapped on a bandage, and told himself it would calm down overnight. He didn't tell his parents. Didn't want to hear the whole "you're overtraining" lecture from his mom, or get a speech about mental toughness from his dad. On Wednesday morning, the area had swelled more. It was now the size of a golf ball, tender, tight, the skin shiny like plastic wrap. Evan stood shirtless in the mirror, running a finger around the swelling. He knew something wasn't right, but he also knew that week 1 of the season was 10 days away. Stanford wasn't going to wait. "You should go to a doctor," Chloe said again when she saw it before school. Evan shook his head. "They'll just tell me to rest it. I can't." His mom, Linda, noticed him favoring the shoulder during breakfast. "You okay, hun?" "Just sore. From presses." She didn't press the issue, though she watched him with that mom look that said she knew he wasn't being totally honest. That afternoon at football practice, Coach Dunning ran full contact drills. Evan took a hit to his right side, not even that hard, and doubled over. It felt like lightning shooting through his arm. His hand went numb for a moment. Miguel helped him up. "Bro, that looked bad. You okay?" Evan gritted his teeth. "Fine. Keep it coming." But he couldn't finish the practice. Not fully. Not with the pain. Not with the way his shirt now rubbed raw against the swelling. At home that night, he peeled off the bandage. The bump was now the size of a tennis ball. A red ring encircled it, and worst of all, faint red lines had begun to crawl outward. He remembered Chloe saying something once, reading it online, red streaks equal to blood poisoning. He brushed the thought away, popped some ibuprofen, went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. He couldn't lie on his right side. Every time he shifted, pain bloomed from his shoulder like a fresh bruise. He checked his temperature. 100.8, low-grade fever. "It's fine," he told himself. "Just the body healing. Just a little inflammation." He'd had worse. By Thursday morning, the pain had changed. It wasn't localized anymore, not just a tender spot he could mute with grit and denial. It had become something deeper, something pulsing beneath the skin, like it had found its own heartbeat. When Evan woke up, drenched in sweat, he knew instantly that this wasn't just a gym injury. He sat on the edge of his bed, blinking away dizziness. The room felt too bright, his breathing too shallow. When he lifted the hem of his shirt and angled himself toward the mirror on the closet door, his stomach turned. The swelling on his shoulder had doubled overnight. What had been the size of a tennis ball was now pushing into the shape of a lemon. The skin stretched tight and glossy. The edges were no longer red. They were a dusky purple, spreading like bruised ink under the flesh. And the faint red lines he'd seen the night before were no longer faint. They were streaks, clear, sharp, and running like tiny rivers away from the swollen mass. His phone buzzed. A text from Miguel. "Ready for push day? Let's hit it early." Evan stared at his reflection. His shoulder throbbed in time with his pulse, pain radiating down his arm. But the first thing he thought wasn't, "I'm sick," or "I need help." It was, "Scouts are coming in 9 days. He typed back, "Yeah, be there in 20. Downstairs, Linda was packing her lunch for her shift at the diner when Evan shuffled into the kitchen. She took one look at his pale face and glassy eyes. "Honey, you don't look good," she said. "Are you feeling sick?" "I'm fine," he lied, reaching for the cereal box. His hand trembled. Linda stepped closer, concern deepening. "Let me see your shoulder." He froze. "Mom, I'm okay, really, just sore." "You're sweating," she said, "and you look like you barely slept." Before she could insist further, Ray entered the kitchen, coffee in hand, dressed in his mechanic uniform. He clapped Evan on the back, on the wrong shoulder, and Evan bit down hard to keep from crying out. Ray didn't notice. "Morning, champ. Big lifts today?" Evan nodded stiffly. "Atta boy," Ray said with a proud grin. "Push through. Days like this separate the good from the great." Linda shot her husband a look. A quiet fight began in that glance. Concern versus ego, intuition versus expectation, but it ended the way it always did, swallowed down with a tense breath. Linda let it go. For now. At the gym, Miguel took one look at Evan and frowned. "Dude, you look awful." "Just tired," Evan said, rolling his shoulder, pretending the pain was manageable. He wasn't sure if he was trying to prove something to Miguel or himself. Miguel wasn't convinced. "You sure you don't want to skip shoulders today? We can do legs." "No," Evan snapped, harsher than intended. He softened. "Sorry. Just, let's get through it." They started with light bench warm-ups. Evan managed the bar, then 135, but when they jumped to 185, he couldn't stabilize the weight. His right arm wobbled uncontrollably, and the pain exploded under the skin, sharp and electric. He bailed early, the bar clanging against the safety catches. Miguel jumped up. "Okay, that's it. Dude, seriously, you need to go see a doctor. That's not normal." Evan pressed a trembling hand against the swollen mound of his shoulder and felt the heat radiating off it. He swallowed hard. "I'll go tomorrow if it's still bad." Miguel stared at him, disbelief twisting his features. "Tomorrow? Evan, that thing looks infected as hell." Evan didn't answer. He couldn't, because some part of him already knew Miguel was right. Knew Chloe was right. Knew his mom was right. But the louder part, the part that had been trained, conditioned, sculpted into his bones, kept screaming, "You cannot miss training. Not now. Not ever. Not when scouts are coming." So he stayed. Pushed through 2 more sets he had no business doing. And with each rep, each grimace, each hiss of pain under his breath, the infection burrowed deeper. That afternoon at school, Chloe noticed he was unusually quiet. In chemistry class, she leaned closer and whispered, "Evan, are you okay? You look like you're gonna pass out." He avoided her eyes. "Just tired." Chloe's face softened into compassion and frustration. "Can I see it, please?" "No, you're scaring me. I said I'm fine." After school, Evan skipped hanging out with friends. He drove home, gripping the wheel with his left hand, while his right arm hung uselessly at his side. Every bump on the road shot pain up his spine. Once home, he trudged upstairs and peeled off his shirt. What stared back at him in the bathroom mirror looked alien. The swelling was now edging toward the size of a grapefruit. The colors were worse, deep purples mixed with splotches of dark, ominous black. The center bulged outward, as if the skin could split. The red streaks were unmistakable now, branching down his biceps, reaching toward his elbow. He pressed the area lightly and nearly screamed. Heat radiated through his palm, his vision pulsed, his breath caught. For the first time since this all began, Evan felt fear. Real fear. The kind that starts deep in the gut and rises until it chokes your throat. A feverish chill raced through him, and he sat down on the edge of the tub, breathing in shallow gasps. He thought about calling his mom, about texting Chloe, about driving to the ER, but then he thought of Ray, of Coach Dunning, of Stanford, and he whispered to himself, barely audible, "It'll be better tomorrow." But tomorrow was already too late. By Friday morning the world felt tilted. Evan woke up shivering violently despite the summer heat seeping through his half-open window. Sweat clung to his skin in a cold, clammy layer, and his throat was raw from breathing through another night of shallow, ragged gasps. When he tried to sit up, a bolt of pain shot from his right shoulder down to his fingertips, so sharp and sudden it made his vision blur. He staggered to the mirror, gripping the dresser for balance. What he saw wasn't a shoulder anymore. It was an injury that looked like it belonged in a medical journal or a horror movie. The swelling had grown even larger, pushing outward grotesquely. The skin stretched thin and glassy like it could split open at any moment. The purple-black patches had spread, and the center had darkened into a color no skin should ever be, and the red streaks, God, the red streaks, ran all the way down his arm now, distinct and alarming, like someone had drawn them with a marker. His heart thudded in his chest as he touched the area around the swelling. It felt hot, unnaturally hot, like a fever radiating through his flesh. A wave of nausea hit him. He grabbed the edge of the sink, breathing hard. This wasn't just bad, this was dangerous, but then came the voice in his head, the one he'd inherited from years of football, from coaches who shouted through gritted teeth, from a father who played through injuries until his knee finally snapped. Pain is weakness leaving the body. Don't let one bad day crush your dream. Tough it out. He pulled away from the mirror and forced himself to get dressed. When he reached the kitchen, Linda turned from the stove, spatula in hand, eyes widening at the sight of him. "Evan, sweetheart, you look awful." She put down the pan and stepped toward him. "You're pale. You're shaking. Are you sick?" "I'm fine," he muttered. "You're not fine." Linda touched his forehead, then jerked her hand back. "You're burning up." Evan shrugged weakly. "Just overdid it yesterday." Before Linda could say more, Ray walked in, lunchbox in hand. He glanced at his son, frowning slightly. "What's wrong with him?" "He has a fever," Linda said sharply. "And something's wrong with his shoulder. I want him to go to a doctor." Ray sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's almost scouting season. He can't miss workouts. Fever comes and goes. It'll break." Linda shot him a glare. "Ray." He ignored it, turning to Evan. "You good to practice this afternoon?" Evan hesitated. His arm throbbed, his head spun, but he nodded anyway. "Yeah, I'm good." Linda stepped forward, anger in her eyes. "Ray, he is clearly not—" But Evan had already grabbed his backpack and headed for the door, desperate to escape the conversation, desperate not to look weak. Not now. Not ever. At school, Chloe spotted him instantly. She ran up to him as he walked down the hallway, weaving through students. "Evan! Evan, wait!" She grabbed his arm, the left one, and looked up at him with alarm. "Oh my God! You look worse than yesterday." "I'm fine," he said again, the lie automatic and hollow. Chloe lowered her voice. "Please, Evan, show me your shoulder, just for 1 second." "No, why not?" "Because it's fine," he snapped, louder than intended. Students turned to look. Chloe recoiled slightly, not from fear but from hurt. "I'm trying to help you," she whispered, and for a moment, just a moment, Evan wanted to tell her everything, about the pain, the fever, the fear he hadn't dared speak aloud, but he swallowed it down. "I just need to get through today," he said, his voice barely holding steady. During chemistry class he couldn't focus, the room tilted, the fluorescent lights buzzing in his ears. He scribbled notes he couldn't read, his shirt stuck to his back. His pulse throbbed in his shoulder like a drum. Halfway through the period, Chloe slid a small note onto his desk. "If you collapse again like last season, it won't be dehydration this time, please. Doctor, today." He crumpled it, not out of anger at her, but at himself, because she was right. That afternoon, football practice was brutal. Coach Dunning had the team running full contact drills in the heat. Evan tried to hide the way he favored his right arm, tried to push through, tried to pretend his body wasn't failing him piece by piece. Then, during a tackling drill, another player slammed into him, nothing out of the ordinary, but the impact on Evan's shoulder made a scream tear from his throat. He collapsed to the turf, clutching his arm, the world spinning violently. Coach Dunning blew his whistle, storming over. "Granger, what the hell is going?" The words died in his throat when he saw Evan's shoulder through the torn fabric of his practice jersey. Even the tough, unflinching old-school coach went still. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "What is that?" Evan, gasping for air, couldn't speak. Miguel dropped to his knees beside him. "Coach, he needs a hospital. Now." Coach Dunning turned to the assistant. "Get him off the field. Someone call his parents, and mark him out. He doesn't come back until a doctor clears him." Evan's pride crumbled right there on the grass, but beneath the humiliation, the fear grew sharper. He could no longer pretend this was nothing. Still, when Linda arrived to take him to urgent care, Evan forced a smile. "I'm fine. Let's just see what they say." But even as he said the words, a fresh streak of red crept further down his arm. Unnoticed, time was slipping, and he had no idea how little he had left. The urgent care clinic smelled like antiseptic and overworked air conditioning. A few wilted magazines lay forgotten on a scratched coffee table in the waiting room. Linda Granger sat beside Evan, clutching her purse so tightly her knuckles were white. Evan sat slouched, his head leaning against the wall, sweat collecting at his temples. His shirt barely fit over his swollen shoulder, and the red streaks beneath his skin were creeping downward with visible malice. "I don't like this," Linda whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't like the look of those lines." "That's not normal, Evan." He didn't answer. He could barely focus on her face. His body felt disconnected, like a series of overheated parts trying to function independently. The lights above were too bright. The air felt too thin. After what felt like hours but was maybe 20 minutes, a nurse called his name. He followed her slowly, his legs weak beneath him, Linda supporting him like he was twice his age. In the exam room, the nurse checked his vitals, eyebrows furrowing as the thermometer beeped. "Temperature's 101.8, she said, glancing at the screen. "And blood pressure's low." She stepped out quietly. A minute later a young doctor entered, early 30s, tired eyes, quick voice. He shook Linda's hand, then turned to Evan. "What brings you in today?" Evan tried to lift his arm to gesture, but the pain was too much. He simply said, "My shoulder, it hurts, a lot." The doctor peeled back the edge of Evan's sleeve. His mouth flattened. "How long has it looked like this?" 4 days, Linda answered quickly. "It started as a pimple, then it swelled. He's had a fever since yesterday, and the red lines. Any chills, nausea, vomiting?" The doctor interrupted, gently prodding around the swollen area with gloved hands. "Yes," Evan managed, "all of it." The doctor stepped back and pulled off his gloves. "Okay, this looks like a soft tissue infection, possibly cellulitis. We'll prescribe antibiotics. You'll need to rest. If the redness spreads more, go to the ER." Linda frowned. "That's it? Shouldn't he have blood work, or 4 antibiotics?" "This doesn't seem emergent," the doctor said quickly, already typing into the computer. "If it gets worse or doesn't respond to oral antibiotics in 48 hours, escalate care, but no need to jump the gun just yet." Evan closed his eyes. He couldn't even process the conversation. His entire right side throbbed like a second heart had been surgically installed and set to explode. Linda was less patient. "Doctor, the red lines, those are signs of blood poisoning. That's what I've read. Shouldn't that mean something?" The doctor sighed. "Red streaks can happen with local inflammation. Let's monitor it. I'm prescribing Bactrim and ibuprofen. He should feel better within a day or 2. They left the clinic with a bottle of pills and no peace of mind. Evan didn't say a word on the drive home. He stared out the passenger window, watching trees blur past as his vision swam. By the time they pulled into the driveway, his hands were shaking again. Linda helped him into the house. "You're not going to practice," she said, her voice steely. "I have to," Evan murmured. "No. You don't. I can't fall behind," he said. "Not now. I'll go after." "Absolutely not." But Evan didn't hear her. He'd already collapsed onto the couch, curling onto his side, breathing through the pain. The fever was climbing. His thoughts were fogged. He popped one of the pills the clinic gave him and fell asleep without meaning to. When he woke up, it was dark. The living room lights were off. A fan hummed somewhere nearby, but it did nothing to cool the fire raging inside him. He sat up too fast and nearly threw up. His head swam. His shirt clung to his back like he'd just stepped out of a shower. He stumbled toward the kitchen and found Linda at the table, paperwork spread out in front of her. Medical bills, insurance forms, a calculator blinking angrily. She looked up when she saw him. I was about to wake you. How are you feeling? Evan leaned against the fridge for support. I have a chemistry test tomorrow. I should study. Linda's face twisted in disbelief. Your body is breaking down, and you're worried about a test? It matters. Not if you're dead, she snapped, then immediately softened. Evan, honey, please, we can go to the hospital tonight. Let's not wait. He opened the fridge and grabbed a bottle of water, trying not to show how badly his hands were shaking. Let's wait until morning. If I'm not better, we'll go. Linda stared at him for a long time, then nodded. First thing, I mean it. That night Evan dreamed of lightning. White-hot crawling lightning striking his shoulder again and again. He woke up screaming at 3:06 a.m. Linda ran into the room, switching on the light, and froze. Evan's right arm was swollen, nearly double its normal size. The skin across his shoulder was a horrific patchwork of black, purple, and yellow-green. The red streaks had spread all the way down to his wrist. He was drenched, convulsing, his teeth chattering uncontrollably. Mom, he rasped. I can't. Linda grabbed her phone, heart hammering, and dialed 911 with fingers that barely obeyed her. He's burning up. 104. I think it's blood poisoning. Please hurry. He's shaking his arm. It looks dead. Please. The dispatcher stayed calm, professional, but Linda was falling apart. She cradled Evan's soaked body as he curled on his side in agony, whispering his name over and over. Sirens arrived minutes later. The paramedics took one look at Evan's arm and called in a code red. They loaded him into the ambulance, hooked up oxygen, and pushed fluids as the vehicle tore through the night. The last thing Evan remembered, before the lights faded, was the paramedic's voice over the radio. 18-year-old male. Suspected necrotizing fasciitis. Septic. We're coming in hot. The ambulance doors burst open the moment they reached the ER bay. Nurses and trauma techs were already waiting, alerted by the paramedics' code red. Evan was barely conscious now, his eyes glazed, skin clammy, body trembling. A paramedic barked updates as they wheeled him in. 18-year-old male, high-grade fever, suspected necrotizing soft tissue infection, extensive swelling in the right shoulder with lymphangitic streaking, possible septic shock. Linda ran alongside the gurney, breathless, eyes locked on her son's pale face. She had never seen him look so small. This boy, who just 2 weeks ago was benching over 300 pounds and running 40-yard dashes like his future depended on them, now looked fragile, like a dying ember. A nurse stepped into her path. Ma'am, we'll take it from here. You can wait just past the doors. Linda hesitated, then stopped, watching Evan disappear into the sterile fluorescent haze. The doors hissed closed, sealing her out. 10 minutes later, Ray Granger arrived, still in his grease-stained mechanic's uniform. One look at Linda's face, and he knew something had gone horribly wrong. Where is he? He demanded, voice tight. They just took him back, she whispered, eyes shining. Ray, it's bad. I've never seen him like that. His arm doesn't even look like his. Ray paced, fists clenched. God damn it, we should have brought him in earlier. I tried, she snapped. You're the one who said the ambulance was too expensive. Ray turned to her, defensive. They charged $2,000 for a 10-minute ride, Linda. We're already drowning in bills. She stood, her voice rising. Our son is back there, fighting for his life, and you're still thinking about money? Before he could respond, a nurse returned. Are you Evan Granger's parents? They nodded quickly. The nurse gestured down the hallway. Dr. Hayes will speak with you now. Dr. Richard Hayes was a trauma physician in his 40s, his calm demeanor hardened by years of triage chaos. But even he looked troubled as he spoke. Your son is very ill, he began. We're seeing signs of systemic infection. His blood pressure is dropping, heart rate elevated, fever spiking. The red streaks on his arm are classic lymphangitis. The shoulder is severely swollen, with necrotic discoloration. I believe we're dealing with necrotizing fasciitis, a flesh-eating bacterial infection. Linda's breath caught. Ray looked confused. But that started as a pimple. Dr. Hayes nodded grimly. Yes. A small skin breach, likely exposed to MRSA bacteria, methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. Very common in gym environments, on shared equipment. If introduced into soft tissue, it can spread aggressively. Linda blinked. But we went to urgent care, just yesterday. They gave him pills. They should have sent him here immediately, Hayes said. This is a surgical emergency. Oral antibiotics don't touch an infection like this once it gets into the fascia. Time is everything. He needed 4 antibiotics and surgical debridement within hours. Ray's face twisted. So, what now? We're prepping for emergency surgery, Hayes said. We'll need to open the area, remove all infected and dead tissue. It's aggressive, fast-moving. If we don't get ahead of it now, the infection could reach his bloodstream entirely, or worse, his organs. If that happens... He didn't finish the sentence. Linda whispered, "Is he going to lose his arm?" Dr. Hayes exhaled. "We're going to try to save as much as we can. But I'll be honest, this is one of the worst types of infections we see, and your son waited too long." There was silence, a crushing, suffocating silence. Hayes looked at them both. "We need your consent to operate. Right now." Linda nodded immediately. Ray hesitated. "What about insurance?" Hayes froze. Then softly, "He's under 18. This is emergency surgery. We'll treat him. But, yes, the hospital will bill." Ray looked at Linda. She stared at him like she didn't know who he was. "He could die, Ray." "I don't care about a damn bill." Hayes gave them a form and disappeared behind the doors. An hour later, Evan lay on the operating table, pale as marble under the surgical lights. Dr. Maria Santos, an infectious disease surgeon, made the first incision. As she opened the shoulder, her worst fears were confirmed. The deltoid muscle was almost entirely compromised, gray, necrotic, with a foul odor that filled the OR. Black tissue crumbled at the edges. She cut deeper. The infection had traveled beyond the superficial layers, tunneling through muscle like a parasite. Every inch removed was an inch of Evan's future carved away. By the end of the operation, nearly 70% of his deltoid was gone. Santos had to leave the wound open. Suturing it closed would trap residual bacteria. Instead, they packed it with sterile gauze and covered it with a vacuum dressing. Evan would need multiple debridement surgeries in the days ahead. Back in the waiting room, Linda and Ray sat in silence. The vending machine buzzed. A man coughed down the hall. Somewhere, a baby cried. After 3 hours, Dr. Santos appeared. "He made it through the procedure," she said. "He's in recovery. We were able to stabilize him. But I need to be honest with you. There was significant tissue loss." Ray stood. "How bad?" Dr. Santos glanced down at her hands, then back up. "Most of the deltoid muscle is gone. It's likely he'll have long-term mobility issues. He won't be able to raise his right arm above his head. He'll need extensive physical therapy." Linda's voice trembled. "Will he ever play football again?" The question hung in the air. Dr. Santos didn't answer right away. Finally, she said gently, "No, I'm sorry." Linda's knees buckled. Ray caught her just before she hit the ground. The recovery room was quiet, dim, and antiseptic. Evan lay motionless under layers of warm blankets, an oxygen tube beneath his nose, monitors beeping softly at his side. The lights above were low, casting his pale, sweat-drenched face in gentle shadow. Tubes snaked from his arms, delivering fluids, antibiotics, and pain medication. The right side of his upper body was heavily wrapped in gauze and plastic. A vacuum-sealed wound, dressing humming quietly, like a machine trying to breathe for him. Linda sat beside the bed, clutching Evan's hand in both of hers. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her voice hoarse from crying. Ray stood at the window, arms crossed, staring blankly at the parking lot below, his reflection a blurred outline in the glass. Evan stirred, just a twitch at first, then his head rolled slightly to one side. His eyelids fluttered open slowly, revealing hazy, fever-glossed eyes. "Mom!" His voice was dry, barely audible. Linda leaned in. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here. What happened?" She brushed the hair from his damp forehead. "You're okay now. You had surgery." "They stopped the infection." He blinked slowly, trying to focus. "My shoulder." Linda hesitated. "You're going to need time to heal. You're on antibiotics. They did everything they could." His head moved slightly, a flinch of discomfort. "Hurts." "I know," she whispered, kissing his knuckles. "Just rest." But Evan didn't rest. Not really. A few hours later, when the haze of anesthesia faded and the pain meds wore off just enough, he asked the question they'd been dreading. "Did they save it?" Ray turned from the window, but Linda spoke first. "They saved your arm." "They did. But the muscle," Evan rasped. Will I play again?" The silence was deafening. Dr. Santos entered just then, almost as if summoned by the question. She greeted them softly, then stepped to the side of the bed, glancing over the chart before looking at Evan. "You've been through a lot," she said gently. But you're strong. You made it through the most dangerous phase. That's no small thing. Will I play again? Evan asked, more firmly this time, blinking at her through the hospital haze. Dr. Santos took a breath. Evan, we had to remove a significant portion of your deltoid muscle. Over 2/3. There was no choice. The tissue was necrotic. He stared at her blankly. She continued, you'll still have some mobility in the arm. You'll go through physical therapy. You'll regain function. But full strength? Full range of motion? Contact sports? No, I'm sorry. Evan turned his head toward the ceiling, lips parted slightly, as though he might argue, or scream, or cry. But no sound came. Only silence. She added gently, the fact that you're alive is a miracle. That you still have your arm at all is something I don't say lightly. But I need you to understand, football is no longer part of your future. She stayed for another moment, offering a kind, almost maternal look, before quietly leaving the room. Ray moved to say something, maybe an apology, maybe encouragement, but Evan turned his face to the wall. Just give me some time, he murmured. For the next 2 days, Evan said very little. Nurses came and went, changing dressings, checking vitals, monitoring his blood work. The fever finally broke. His color improved, but emotionally he was hollow. Every time someone walked past his room in cleats, or a football game played on the TV in the corner, his face tensed. He didn't want the TV on anymore. Didn't want visitors. Didn't ask about school. Didn't want to see Chloe on the 3rd day Dr. Santos returned with a physical therapist. Evan didn't look at them as they entered. The therapist, Mark, was soft-spoken, friendly, and carried a gentle authority. We're going to start very small today, Mark said. Just testing your ability to move the joint. No pressure. No pain if we can help it. Evan didn't respond. Mark pulled up a stool, gently unwrapped part of the dressing, and carefully examined the wound. The sight made Linda flinch, even after seeing it several times. There was a massive crater in Evan's shoulder. Where the powerful deltoid had once been, there was now a sunken hollow, a deep concavity of skin, scar tissue, and trauma. The skin around it was puckered, reddish-purple and tight. It looked surgical, permanent, ugly. Okay, Evan, Mark said softly. Let's try to lift your arm just a few inches. Slowly. Evan tried. He really did, but the pain was immediate, not just physical, emotional. His arm trembled and barely moved more than 3 inches before he let out a low, guttural sound, frustration mixed with grief. I can't, he whispered. That's okay, Mark said quickly. This is day 1. It's going to take time. Evan looked at him, eyes full of quiet rage. You don't get it. I spent years building that arm, hours in the gym, every day, every rep. For what? Linda stepped forward. Honey, please. No, Evan said sharply. Don't. Just don't. He turned away from both of them, shoulders shaking, not from pain now, but from tears. Silent, bitter, helpless tears. Later that night, as Linda sat beside him in the dark, Evan finally spoke again. It was just a pimple, he said quietly. Linda nodded, brushing his hair back again. I didn't think it mattered. I know. I had everything planned, Mom. My whole life. Stanford, the scholarship. The first game, scouts were coming. I know, baby. They're not coming anymore, are they? She couldn't answer. He already knew. The first week after surgery passed in a blur of pain medication, lab work, dressing changes, and the quiet hum of machines monitoring Evan's every breath. The infection had stopped spreading, but the emotional damage was only beginning. It settled into the room like a fog, thick, heavy, and suffocating. Evan barely spoke. Nurses tried small talk, he ignored it. Doctors came in with updates, he nodded without looking at them. Friends from the football team sent messages that went unread. Even Miguel's voice on voicemail, choked with worry, didn't break through. He wasn't angry at them. He wasn't angry at anyone. He was simply empty. On the 8th day, a nurse came in early to change the wound dressing. We'll have to remove the vacuum seal now, she said gently. You're stable enough, but the site may be sensitive. Evan stared at the ceiling as she worked. He didn't flinch when the adhesive peeled his skin, didn't react when the air hit the wound. He didn't want to see it, but the nurse's angle forced the mirror on the wall to catch the reflection. For a moment he froze. His shoulder, his powerful, sculpted, hard-earned shoulder, was gone. In its place was a crater, a hollow, puckered void where his deltoid used to be. Shiny scar tissue ringed the edges like a burned border. The inner cavity was pink, raw, sunken. A part of him had been scooped out and discarded, leaving a deformity so alien he couldn't recognize his own body. Linda noticed his breath catch. She reached for his hand. "Honey, don't look at—" But he couldn't stop. He stared at the mirror until his vision blurred. Then he looked at his arm. The arm that had once tackled players twice his size. The arm that had held trophies. The arm that had thrown a football like a missile. Now it trembled when he tried to lift it. It moved only halfway before the muscles failed, like a puppet with cut strings. His voice cracked as he whispered, "That's me?" The nurse paused. Linda's eyes filled instantly. "That's my arm?" Linda nodded, wiping her cheeks. "It's still you, Evan. It's still your arm. You're still my boy." He shook his head. "No, that's not me. That's not—" His voice broke. "I look like a monster." Linda leaned forward. "Please don't say that." But he wasn't listening anymore. He couldn't hear anything over the sound of his own breathing. Sharp, panicked, shallow. He gripped the bed sheets like he was falling off a cliff. "I worked for years," he whispered. "I gave everything. For what? For this?" Linda tried to hold him, but Evan turned away, curling toward the wall, hiding his face. That night, after she and Ray went home, Evan lay in the dim hospital room, listening to the machines beep in steady rhythm. Somewhere down the hall, a patient coughed. A nurse laughed quietly with another. Life went on around him, but he felt suspended, stuck between what he had been and what he was now. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Chloe 6 missed calls. Miguel 11 messages. Coach Dunning 1 voicemail. He didn't open any of it. He thumbed through old photos instead. There he was under stadium lights, helmet tucked under his arm, grin wide and fearless. There he was, benching 315 with Miguel spotting. There he was with Chloe, her arms around his shoulders, her smile bright against his jersey. He stared at those pictures until the screen blurred behind tears he refused to let fall. The next day, Chloe came to visit. She entered quietly, clutching a bouquet of sunflowers, his mom's idea, no doubt. She stopped at the foot of the bed. "Hey," she said softly. He didn't look at her. "You should go," she swallowed. "I wanted to see you. You didn't answer my messages. I saw them, and I don't want you here." Her breath hitched. "Evan, don't do that. Don't shut me out. You don't get it." His voice was flat, brittle. "You didn't see what they took from me." She stepped closer. "I don't care about football. I care about you." "Yeah?" He finally looked at her, eyes hollow. "Then look at this." With a shaky hand, he pulled down the edge of the gown, revealing the sunken crater on his shoulder. Chloe's face went pale. Not disgust, but shock, pain, grief. She pressed a hand to her mouth. Evan saw all of it. "Exactly," he whispered. "Go. No, Evan, go." She hesitated, tears forming, then backed out of the room, sunflower bouquet trembling in her hands. She left it on the chair by the door and slipped out. Evan didn't watch her leave. Miguel came later that evening, but Evan pretended to be asleep. His father tried talking to him, offering encouragement, but Evan stared at the wall until Ray left in frustrated silence. The physical therapist returned daily, but Evan barely participated. Every attempt at movement felt like a reminder of his failure. Every inch of progress felt hollow. The worst part wasn't the pain, it wasn't the wound, it wasn't even the lost scholarship. It was the silence inside him, the mental void where ambition used to live. He felt like a ghost trapped in his own body, present but no longer alive. On the 10th day, a hospital social worker visited. She spoke of counseling, mental health resources, support groups. Evan listened politely, expression blank, eyes distant. When she left, he said nothing. Later that night, he lay awake, staring at the dark ceiling. His right arm rested against the mattress, useless, numb, foreign. His future, once bright, sharp electric, now stretched before him like a long, empty hallway. He closed his eyes. For the first time since he was a child, Evan Granger didn't know who he was. Evan was discharged on a Tuesday morning, under a gray, cloudless sky. The nurse wheeled him to the car with the kind of cheerful professionalism reserved for people who had survived something worth celebrating. But for Evan, nothing felt victorious. Linda opened the passenger door gently, guiding his weakened frame into the seat. The ride home was quiet, except for the low hum of the tires on asphalt. Ray drove, jaw clenched, eyes straight ahead. Linda occasionally glanced at Evan, but he never met her gaze. When they pulled into the driveway, Evan stared at the house that once held dreams, a wall plastered with medals, team photos, college flyers. Now it looked like a museum of a life that no longer belonged to him. Inside, the living room was filled with balloons and a crude welcome home banner. Miguel must have helped. Chloe's card was taped to the wall. "You're more than football." Evan didn't even glance at it. He went straight to his room, closed the door, and stayed there. For the first few days, Linda brought food to his bedside, trays of soup, sandwiches, scrambled eggs. Most came back untouched. Evan barely spoke. He lay in bed, blinds closed, staring at the ceiling or scrolling blankly through his phone. He unfollowed every college football account, deleted his highlight reels, archived every photo of him in uniform. The scar on his shoulder ached, especially at night. He didn't take the pain meds. The pain reminded him he was still alive. Barely. Ray tried once, just once. He knocked, then opened the door without waiting. "You gotta stop this, son." Evan didn't move. "You're home. You're alive. You didn't lose your arm. You still have a future." No response. Ray sighed. "I know it's not what you wanted, but you don't get to quit now. You think I wanted to blow out my knee junior year? You think I liked giving up my shot at Nebraska? Still nothing. You think I liked watching my friends get scholarships while I stayed home to change oil and replace brake pads?" Evan turned his head slowly. "You think this is about you?" he said, voice low and raw. "You lost football. I lost everything. My body, my future, my identity." Ray flinched. Evan's voice shook. "You pushed me to keep going, to ignore the pain, push through. So I did. And now look at me." Ray opened his mouth, but the words stuck. He backed out of the room and shut the door quietly behind him. Evan didn't leave his room for a week. Miguel texted every day. Funny memes, encouragement. "Let's play Madden like old times." Then, on day 8, "You're not alone, bro. Don't shut us out." Evan replied with a single word, "Stop." Miguel didn't text again. Chloe tried once more, standing on the porch holding the sunflowers she'd left at the hospital. Linda answered the door. "He won't see anyone," she said gently. "I'm sorry." Chloe hesitated, then nodded. "Tell him I still care, even if he thinks he doesn't deserve it." Inside, Evan watched her leave from the upstairs window. He turned away before she looked back. In therapy, Mark visited the house for sessions, but Evan hardly tried. His range of motion was poor, his strength nearly gone. Each failed rep felt like a confirmation of uselessness. One afternoon, Linda sat beside him with an envelope. "These are the medical bills," she said, trying to sound calm. "After insurance, we still owe over $60,000. The hospital has a payment plan." Evan stared at the papers, throat tightening. "That's on me," he said. "Isn't it? It's not your fault." "Yes, it is. You didn't know." I ignored it. I let it get worse, because I didn't want to look weak. Because Dad would have said, "Stop," Linda said firmly, placing her hand over his. "That's not your burden to carry. It's ours. We're family." He didn't cry, but his eyes shimmered. That night, for the first time in weeks, he came out of his room and sat silently at the dinner table. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. But something had shifted. The next morning, Linda walked past his room and found him sitting at his desk, looking at old college brochures. Not Stanford, not Michigan, community colleges, online programs. His right hand shook slightly as he wrote something on a notepad, barely legible with his weakened grip. She didn't say anything, just smiled and kept walking. That afternoon, he took his first walk outside, just to the mailbox. The sun felt foreign on his skin. A neighbor waved. He didn't wave back, but he saw it. It registered. Later, he stood in front of the mirror in his room, pulled off his shirt, and stared at the scar again. It still horrified him, but something was different. It wasn't just a reminder of loss now. It was also a mark of survival. He picked up his phone and opened the camera. For the first time, he took a photo of the scar and didn't delete it. A few days after Evan's first walk outside, Linda asked him to come downstairs. "I want to show you something," she said, holding her phone. "Promise you won't freak out?" Evan, curious but cautious, followed her to the kitchen. She opened the YouTube app and handed him the phone. End screen was a video, a slideshow of images. Evan in his football jersey in the hospital bed, the surgical scar blurred for modesty. Then a voiceover began. It was Linda's voice, trembling at first, but growing stronger as she spoke about what happened, the pimple, the infection, the surgeries, the aftermath. His video wasn't dramatic. It wasn't edited for clicks. It was honest, raw, painfully human. The end, her voice cracked. My son is a fighter, not just on the field, but here, now. If you work out in a gym or have a teen in your life, please learn from what happened to us. MRSA is real, and time matters. Van blinked. You posted this, Burr? I had to, she said quietly. I just wanted people to know, to stop it from happening to someone else. Burr. E scrolled to the view count, 71,000. E scrolled further, the comments. This could have been my son. I'm crying. Thank you for sharing your story. I used to ignore the red lines. Never again, Evan. If you're reading this, you're not alone. His thumb hovered over the screen. Then he scrolled faster. There were thousands of comments. People from across the country, parents, athletes, coaches, nurses, were sharing it, tagging others, calling it a warning every athlete should see. Miguel had posted it too. Chloe had commented. Even Coach Dunning had reshared it on Facebook with the caption, "He was our strongest player. Now he's our strongest survivor." Evan stood there, stunned. For so long he had felt forgotten, like his story had ended the day he left the field. But now it was just beginning again. He scrolled back to the top. His eyes caught on one comment, pinned at the top. Don't let what you lost stop you from sharing what you've learned. You survived for a reason. Later that night, Evan sat at his desk and opened his phone camera again. This time, he didn't just take a photo. He recorded a short video. It was shaky, under 2 minutes long, and his voice cracked twice. But it was real. Hey, I'm Evan Granger. You might have seen the video my mom posted. That was me. I popped a pimple after a gym workout. 4 days later, I was in the ICU with flesh-eating bacteria. I lost part of my shoulder. I lost football. I lost who I thought I was. But I didn't lose my life. So if you've ever ignored an infection or told yourself pain was weakness, don't. Listen to your body. You only get one. He hit upload. Then he turned off the phone and went to bed. The next morning, the video had 93,000 views. 3 days later, he was invited to speak at a local high school health assembly. He almost said no, but Miguel pushed him. Linda cried. Chloe texted him, "You'll be great." So he went. He stood in front of 300 students in a gym that smelled like his past, wore a hoodie, breathed deep, and told his story. When he pulled off the hoodie to show his scar, the room went silent. Some kids winced, others stared. No one laughed. Don't wait, he told them. That's the message. Don't wait to speak up. Don't wait to get help. Don't wait to live. When the assembly ended, students lined up to talk to him. One boy, tall, lanky, braces, said, "I had something like that on my leg. My mom said it was just a rash. I'm gonna ask to see a doctor." Evan nodded. Good. That's smart. It's your body. You have the right to protect it. That night, Evan lay in bed, his shoulder still sore, the future still uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, the silence inside him didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like space. Space for something new. The invitations didn't stop after the first school. Within 2 weeks, Evan had spoken at 5 more assemblies, some in middle schools, some in high schools, even one at a local community center where the crowd was mostly parents. Each time he stepped up to the podium, he felt the same flutter of nerves, the same tremor in his weakened arm, the same sting of self-consciousness when the audience caught sight of his scar. But each time he spoke, the knot in his chest loosened a little. At one event, a mother showed him a photo on her phone of her son's infected elbow. "We took him to the ER yesterday because of your story," she said, her voice cracking. "They said it would have gotten worse if we waited. Thank you." Those words stayed with him. Thank you. Not something he had expected to hear again. At home, the atmosphere changed slowly. Not overnight, not all at once, slowly, like winter thawing into spring. Ray approached him differently now, more careful with his words. There was guilt there, unspoken but heavy. One evening, as the sun dipped behind their backyard fence, Ray knocked on Evan's door. "Got a minute?" he asked. Evan hesitated, then nodded. Ray stepped inside and sat on the edge of the bed. "I want to say something, and I'm not great at this kind of stuff. So just let me finish." He paused, collecting himself. "I pushed you too hard. I know that now. I thought I was helping you be tough, strong, better than I was. But I wasn't listening. And you paid the price." Evan stared at the floor. Ray swallowed. I'm proud of you, son. Not because of football, not because of scouts or scholarships. I'm proud because you stood back up. You didn't let this break you." Evan didn't speak immediately. Then, quietly, he said, "It did break me." Ray nodded slowly. "Yeah, but you're rebuilding, and that takes more strength than anything you ever did on a field." For the first time in months, Evan let his father hug him. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't healing everything, but it was something. 3 weeks later, Evan sat in the kitchen with Linda, scrolling through emails. One subject line caught his eye. "We would like you to speak at our statewide health conference." Linda gasped. "Evan, that's amazing, that's huge." He stared at the screen. A conference? He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a professional speaker. He was just a kid who'd made a mistake and survived it. "What if I mess up?" he asked. Linda smiled softly. "Then you'll try again. That's all anyone can do." He accepted. The conference was held in Omaha, in a hotel ballroom filled with doctors, nurses, public health officials, and journalists. Evan's palms were sweaty as he walked up the steps to the stage. The podium felt too tall, the lights too bright. His heart hammered in his chest. Then he saw something in the front row. Justin, the 16-year-old he had met in a hospital months earlier, the one with the prosthetic leg, the one who'd told him he still had value even when he felt hollow. Justin gave him a thumbs up, smiling wide. Evan exhaled. He began speaking. He told them about the gym, the Pimple, the days he ignored the signs, the night he woke up screaming, the ambulance ride, the surgery, the crater left behind, the loss of football, the loss of identity, the depression, the silence, the climb back out, and finally, "I'm here because my story didn't end on that operating table. And if sharing it keeps one kid from waiting too long, if it convinces one parent to listen to their child, if it stops one person from popping something with dirty hands, then everything I lost wasn't lost for nothing." When he finished, the room stood, a standing ovation. For him, he didn't cry. Not then. But later that night, alone in his hotel room, he sat on the edge of the bed and let tears fall freely for the first time since the hospital. Not grief, not anger, something softer, something closer to release. The next morning, his inbox was flooded. Requests from more schools. A message from a nurse in Iowa asking permission to show his video in training. A high school coach from Colorado wanting Evan to talk to his team. A nonprofit offering to sponsor a series of safety workshops. He wasn't a football star anymore. But he was something else. Something new. A voice people listened to. Over the following weeks, Evan and Miguel started working together again. Not in the gym, but in planning talks, recording educational clips for social media, building a small movement around gym safety and infection awareness. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the stadium lights. But it mattered. One afternoon, after filming a short PSA at a local fitness center, Miguel nudged him and said, "You ever think this is what you were supposed to do all along?" Evan smirked. "You think fate took a chunk out of my shoulder to get me to talk more?" Miguel shrugged. "Hey, life's weird like that." Evan laughed, really laughed, for the first time in a long time. Later that night, he opened his laptop and clicked on a tab he'd left untouched for months, college applications. He didn't look at Stanford, or Michigan, or any of the football powerhouses. He looked at majors he'd never considered: public health, psychology, kinesiology, emergency medicine. He wasn't sure where it would lead, but for the first time since the infection, he felt like he had a direction again. Not a map, but a compass. And that was enough. Winter crept into Nebraska quietly, frosting the edges of windows and leaving the mornings smelling like cold metal and distant chimney smoke. Evan felt the shift in the air as he walked across his yard one early December morning, wrapped in a thick hoodie, hands stuffed into his pockets. His breath formed pale clouds that drifted upward and vanished. He had begun walking more lately, not for exercise, not for training, just to think. Thinking used to be dangerous for him, a place where grief waited to ambush him. But now, the silence felt different, less suffocating, more contemplative. He walked down the street and paused in front of the high school football field, its bleachers dusted with frost, the field lights were off, the scoreboard blank, the grass brittle under winter's touch. This place had once been his kingdom, his battlefield, his dream. Now it was just a field. He stood there a long time, hands trembling slightly, not from the cold, but from memory. The last time he stood on that turf, he'd been carried off, barely conscious, shoulder throbbing with an infection he didn't understand. He didn't expect the gate to open behind him. "You're up early." Evan turned. Coach Dunning stood there, bundled in a heavy coat, a thermos of coffee steaming in his hand. He looked older than Evan remembered. More lines on his face, more gray in his beard. "Field maintenance meeting," the coach said, shrugging. "They want to fix the drainage." "Again?" Evan nodded awkwardly. "I was just walking." Coach stepped beside him. "You haven't been back here since, No," Evan said quietly. They stood side by side in silence. The wind whistled softly across the empty bleachers. "You were the best linebacker I ever coached," Dunning said suddenly. Evan looked down at his shoes. "I wasn't the best. I was just the strongest." Coach shook his head. "Strength isn't what made you good. What made you good was that fire, that refusal to quit. I saw the way you talked to the younger players, the way they listened to you. That's leadership, Evan. That's rare. Doesn't matter anymore," Evan murmured. Coach turned to him. "Yes, it does. Because what you're doing now, speaking at schools, teaching kids how to stay safe, that's leadership too. That's saving lives." Evan swallowed hard. "I didn't save my own. You survived," Coach said simply. "And sometimes that's harder." They walked the perimeter of the field together. When they reached the bench where Evan used to sit during games, Coach stopped. "There's something you need to see." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Evan opened it. His breath caught. It was a college letter, addressed to him, from the University of Nebraska, not the football department. "The College of Public Health. We kept getting calls from schools asking about your talks," Coach explained. "Word got around. Someone passed your story along to the right people. They think you'd be a great fit for their program." Evan stared at the letter, throat tightening. I didn't apply." "You didn't have to," Coach said with a small smile. "Sometimes the right doors open themselves." Evan couldn't speak. He folded the letter carefully and slid it into his pocket, feeling its weight in a way that felt strangely grounding. After a moment, Coach asked softly, "Can I see it?" It took Evan a second to understand. "The scar?" he asked. Coach nodded gently. "Only if you're okay with it." Evan hesitated. For months he'd hidden it from the world, out of shame, fear, grief. But something inside him shifted. Slowly he lifted the hem of his hoodie and pulled his arm forward. The winter sunlight illuminated the crater where his deltoid had once been. Sunken, jagged, twisted. A brutal reminder of everything he'd lost. Coach didn't flinch, didn't look away. Instead, he nodded. "That," he said quietly, "is the mark of someone who survived hell." A breath escaped Evan's lungs, shaky, uneven but freeing. Later that week, Miguel drove Evan to a gym, the clean, newly remodeled one across town. Not the one where the infection started. This one smelled of disinfectant and polished floors. It felt safer, different. "I don't know about this," Evan muttered as they walked in. Miguel grinned. "Relax. I'm not asking you to bench. I'm asking you to be here." They moved slowly through the gym, past the machines, past the free weights, past the squat racks. Evan's heart pounded. Every clank of metal, every grunt from a lifter sent a jolt through him. He stopped near the turf area and closed his eyes, breathing through the anxiety. Miguel didn't push. He simply stood beside him. After a minute, Evan opened his eyes and whispered, "Okay, let's keep going." That was all. A few steps, a few breaths, a small victory. That night, back home, Evan sat at his desk and reopened the college letter. He read it again slowly, tracing each word with his eyes. For the first time since losing football, he didn't feel like he was staring at the wrong life. He felt like he was standing at the beginning of the right one. He picked up a pen, his right hand trembling, weak but determined, and began writing his application essay. "The moment I lost my dream was the moment I discovered my purpose." The auditorium was packed. Rows upon rows of seats were filled with students, parents, educators, and even members of the local press. A banner stretched across the stage, Youth Resilience Summit, rising beyond the fall. Evan stood backstage, fidgeting with the cuffs of his shirt. He wore a tailored black button-down, the sleeve on the right side slightly looser to account for the missing muscle beneath. His hand trembled, not from weakness, but from nerves. Miguel gave him a nod from the wings. "You good?" Evan forced a breath. "I'm okay." "You're not just okay," Miguel said. "You're here. That's everything." The event director gave him the cue. Evan stepped into the spotlight, the warmth of the stage lights washing over him like ocean waves. Applause greeted him, polite at first, then stronger. He hadn't even spoken yet. He looked out at the sea of faces, some expectant, some skeptical, all waiting. He cleared his throat. When I was 17, he began, my entire life revolved around football. I had a plan, a path, a future. He paused. Then I popped a pimple. And 4 days later I was in the ICU, dying from a flesh-eating infection. Murmurs rippled through the room. Evan continued. Sounds ridiculous, right? That something so small could destroy so much? But that's how life works. Sometimes the collapse comes quietly. Sometimes it begins with one careless choice and ends with a crater carved into your body. He pulled off his blazer slowly, revealing the scar. The gasp was audible, immediate. Some turned away. Others leaned in closer. I used to hide this, he said, gesturing to the sunken space. I thought it made me weak, disfigured, broken. He looked toward the front row, but now I see it for what it is, a reminder. Not of what I lost, but of what I survived. He let the silence settle for a few seconds. No one moved. Football was my identity, he said. When I lost it, I lost myself. I stopped talking to friends. I pushed away my family. I wanted to disappear. I thought, if I can't be that version of me, then what's the point? A long breath, but the point wasn't to go back to who I was. The point was to become someone new, someone who could take pain and turn it into purpose. He saw people wiping their eyes now, teachers, parents, a few teenagers trying to hide their tears. I speak at schools now. I teach athletes about MRSA. I show this scar not to shock, but to warn. I use my voice to say what I wish I'd heard, that your body is not invincible, that real strength is not pretending you're fine. It's asking for help when you're not. A beat, and maybe, just maybe, losing everything I thought I needed helped me find what I actually do. The room was silent. Then slowly, like the swell of a tide, applause began. Not polite, not obligatory. It was real, thunderous, earned. Evan stepped back, heart pounding. When he left the stage, people stood to their feet. Backstage, Miguel hugged him hard. That was insane, he said. Dude, you killed it. Evan laughed, half disbelieving, half overwhelmed. I didn't think I could say it out loud, he admitted. You didn't just say it, you owned it. Later that night, Evan sat alone outside the venue, legs stretched out on the curb, blazer folded in his lap. The moon hung low above the trees, casting pale shadows. Footsteps approached. He didn't look up. I knew I'd find you out here, said a familiar voice. Evan turned. Chloe stood there, wearing a dark green coat, her hair curled softly, her eyes kind. I didn't know you were coming, he said. I saw the flyer, figured I'd stop by. Hope that's okay. Yeah, it's more than okay. She sat beside him on the curb, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. You were incredible, she said. Evan gave a half smile. I was terrified, didn't show. They sat in silence for a moment. I still have the letter you wrote, he said suddenly. The one you left with the flowers at the hospital. She looked surprised. You do? He nodded. I couldn't read it for a long time, but when I finally did, it felt like someone saw me. Not the athlete, not the patient, me. Chloe blinked quickly, brushing her thumb under one eye. You were always more than football, Evan. I just think you needed to believe that. He looked at her. I do now. They sat quietly as headlights passed by in the distance, casting brief golden flashes across the parking lot. So what now? Chloe asked gently. I applied to college, he said. Public health. I want to help kids before it's too late. Teach, speak, maybe even become a trauma counselor someday. She smiled wide. You'd be great at that. He looked up at the stars. For the longest time, he said, I thought I'd peaked at 17, that the best part of my life was already over. But now, I think I was wrong. He turned to Chloe. I think the best part is just starting. 1 year later, a new video appeared on Evan's YouTube channel. The title was simple, Bar, Don't Wait. T opened with silence, bar, hen a single frame, Evan, sitting in front of a plain black backdrop, wearing a dark t-shirt, the outline of his shoulder scar just barely visible under the fabric. E looked straight into the lens, calm, clear. Older, somehow, Dabar. My name is Evan Granger, he said. I'm 20 years old, and I want to tell you a story. Hen gently, the video cut between moments. Dabar. Lips from his hospital bed. Photos from high school, football games, trophies, Friday night lights. a shot of the red streaks that had crept down his arm, a blurred image of the crater left behind, and finally Evan walking across a college campus, backpack slung over one shoulder. His voice narrated throughout. I thought pain meant progress, that ignoring it meant I was strong, that pushing through meant I was tough. But what I didn't know was that strength isn't silence, it's awareness, it's getting help before it's too late. He paused. 4 days, he said softly. That's all it took for a pimple to become a nightmare, for my dream to disappear. But what I learned in the wreckage was this: sometimes the dream that dies clears space for the purpose you were meant to find. The screen cut to Evan standing in a high school gym, speaking to a crowd of students, raising his arm just high enough to show the curve where muscle used to be. Then his voice, I used to think this scar was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Now I think it might be the beginning of everything good. The final shot was quiet. Evan alone in a gym, sitting on the edge of the mat, looking at a weight rack he didn't need to lift anymore. His voice one last time: if you've ever ignored the warning signs, if you've ever told yourself it's nothing, if you've ever thought you had more time, this is your sign. Don't wait. You only get one body and one life. The screen faded to black. Then text appeared. Flesh-eating bacteria took part of Evan's body, but it didn't take his voice, and it didn't take his future. The video ends, but the story doesn't. Somewhere in Nebraska, a 16-year-old boy watches that clip in his bedroom, finger hovering over the small bump on his shoulder. He hesitates, then turns to his mom and says, "Can we go to urgent care?" Somewhere in California, a gym installs antibacterial wipes at every machine. A new sign reads, "Wipe down. Wash hands. Stay safe." Somewhere in Arizona, a young coach changes his training policy. No more glorifying pain. No more pushing through infection. He starts every season now with Evan's story, and somewhere deep inside a hospital, a surgeon watches Evan's talk between surgeries, pausing for a moment, eyes wet, thinking of all the teenagers she couldn't save in time, and the one who lived. What remains when the lights go out? What's left when the scholarship vanishes? When the crowd stops cheering? When your plans fall apart in 4 days? Sometimes, what remains is what matters most: courage, voice, purpose. A scar doesn't mean the story's over. Sometimes, it's where the story truly begins.